As the planks of Theseus' ship needed repair, it was replaced part by part, up to a point where not a single part from the original ship remained in it anymore. Is it then still the same ship? If all the discarded parts were used to build another ship, which of the two, if either, is the real Ship of Theseus?
Sir, I read in one of your interviews about Writer right now. You said you had made that film when you were 22, and that film was shaped your view as it was then. So the Ship of Theseus, present the next stage in that thinking of yours about the world and how it works.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Also, Right Here Right Now was the first attempt at using film in at simplifying complex ideas. Was an attempt at seeing if film as a tool makes it easier to share an experience, something that would take that would take a huge amount of literature to access. And with Right Here Right Now, I was convinced that I was able to tap into a bit of that, into a glimpse of that possibility.
So, at the time you did Carnival, you spoke about your films and how there's an audience in India craving for such cinema, alternative cinema. You gave a very specific number, 10 million. 10 million people are there in India, possible audience who can watch such films. So, sir, but when it comes to film, the distribution, promotion, all these costs, do they hinder? And in that sense, does online medium make a more feasible choice?
Certainly. First, I'll just give you a quick brief on that number, that seemingly arbitrary number and possibly arbitrary number. If you look at the demographic of youth in this country, of young people in the country, we're looking at a huge demographic. If you look at the age group 14 to 40,
Largest group in India.
that's like 450 million people. Right? That's a huge number. Now, of these 450 million people, I'm on my day-to-day experience, based on my experience of having traveled, having met people, having had the great opportunity and the great privilege to have traveled across the country, been to various parts of the country, villages, towns, met various kinds of people, huge diversity of people. From that, my experience is that 2 in 100 people are kind of intellectually curious, and a series of reasons, a series of consequences, a series of privileges could have led an individual to have intellectual curiosity. So I'm not going to the deconstruction of the causes and consequences that led the person to be intellectually curious, but we can safely assume that 2 in 100 people are intellectually curious. And that gives us, from 450 million, that gives us 9 million people who are intellectually curious. And 9 million is a huge number, right? That's a population of Sweden.
Yes.
So we have the entire population of Sweden as the number of people who are intellectually seeking, who are curious, who are probably seekers, who are looking for answers, who are looking for meaning, who are looking for pushing our understanding of our world, of our universe, of ourselves, who are pushing our possibility of being fairer, pushing our possibility of being kinder. These are people we can definitely say with this 2% of 450 million have a series of privileges, again have a lot of privileges at their disposal to pursue that curiosity. So that's the easiest audience for me to cater to. And also there is a huge gap between the audience that is catered to, largely the other 450 million that are catered to, and this 2%, this small 9 million group. But the 9 million is a huge number for an entire studio to be built up. So I can start new paradigms of distribution, I can bring in new paradigms of production, new paradigms of narratives, and completely new forms of filmmaking, new forms of storytelling to cater to this small audience and still be able to sustain a huge studio on that.
But sir, wouldn't it be a challenge, since the audience is so dispersed, to target these specific audiences?
That's true. That's true. The geographic challenge has been huge in the past. That is also soon disappearing, because now we can demographically cater to people. I consume literature and culture from around the world. I do not consume only things that are available to me in my immediate environment. In fact, I do not consume anything that is available to me in my immediate environment. I don't watch films in theaters that are put out by mainstream filmmakers. I do not watch Indian television at all. And most of my friends have stopped watching Indian television for the longest time. I don't know a single person anymore who is watching Indian television, except for my parents' generation. But from my generation and the younger people who are working in the studio, I have not heard anybody discuss Indian television, Indian fiction television for the longest time, and that means there is a huge gap between what is being produced and what is the new need.
So does that mean to change that audience craze for change and industry will have to respond? Not necessarily in the mainstream Bollywood also, but to provide the audience with a larger array of options in terms of viewing.
Right. So one is that it's possible to demographically distribute content. I do not necessarily need to just confine myself to a theatrical release, as you said. I can be putting out my films online. Ship of Theseus, we put out the film online for free download, and it's being downloaded everywhere in the country. So it's no longer confined by a theatrical release. The theatrical release itself can be reverse engineered from audience demand, from a demographic demand. As we did with Theseus again, we had the Vote for You City campaign, where we invited people to vote for the film to release in their cities. So wherever there was a concentrated demographic of our audience, the film released there. So there are various ways in which we can reach out to our audiences now. So we are no longer geographically constricted as people before us were. So I have that great privilege that all the filmmakers before me didn't in the last 2-3 decades. So that's a great privilege to have. That is the possibility of reaching out to my audience through internet.
So since you're talking about change, do you think since Ship of Theseus was selected at 13 international film festivals, so the new crop of filmmakers, they will take the cinema landscape in India to the international arena and get a big name, get a new perspective on how films can be made in India?
Yes, absolutely, and I would really love to see that. Also, not just that, what has happened in the past, there's a certain politics there's a certain politics to culture, right? And I'm really sorry. There's a certain politics to culture, and what has happened in the past is that European distribution houses and production houses and film festivals have very clearly, and not shying away from it, very clearly in clear words, kind of decided the packaging and the narrative form that will emerge out of Indian art house cinema. Whenever there has been an Indian filmmaker catering to a world audience, the European producers and film festivals have come back to the filmmaker and given very specific comebacks, very specific suggestions and guidances, and very specific instructions of sort. And the films have been designed in the past to cater to that instruction, cater to that demographic, which had a certain idea about India, which had a certain idea about the history here, the context here, the philosophy here. They had a certain worldview of what this place was. And a stereotype. A lot of times a stereotype, but a little more than a stereotype sometimes. Of course, a little an academic stereotype, if you will. But yeah, a pigeonhole nevertheless. And what has become possible now is that because we have this 9 million demographic that I'm talking about, that we can cater to as well, you can make a highly artistic piece of work, cinema, web show, web series, TV show, whatever, a highly artistic piece of work, without compromising on the integrity of, or the creative integrity of the product, without compromising on the intellectual integrity of the thing you're making, and still be able to make it without having to cater to a European audience, or a Bangla audience, or a Malayali audience, or you don't have to cater to, again, geography. You can cater to a worldview. You can cater to a pursuit. You no longer need to cater to a geography or a worldview stemming out of that geographical construction.
See, since about film festivals, you spoke about how film festivals, they have a certain view that, but how exactly important are film festivals? As in, for a new filmmaker, are film fest a kind of gateway, to enter the big industry? Would that be a possibility? Or does it actually, attach a very specific tag that it's a film fest, it won't go for a general audience?
See, it's neither. It's neither. It's both and it's neither. Film festivals are good places to come and celebrate cinema and exchange notes, and for filmmakers to kind of exhibit their work for the first time and to engage with their first audiences. And because the films have been curated, audiences also kind of become curated in an indirect way. And because of that relationship is facilitated. So I think that's all right. It has a function, but the function should not be celebrated beyond that. That's the function of a film festival. It's not the biggest thing that can happen to a film. It's just one of the things that should happen to a film. It's one of the platforms of engagement for a film. One of the many platforms of engagement. And there can be many more.
When I was Ship of Theseus, the two words that struck me was thought-provoking film, and it was very beautiful. So about the cinematography thing, was it a very conscious decision to incorporate that beautiful scenes? Because to describe the film was visual poetry, that's what I felt it was. So was it a very conscious decision? There was one particular scene, and that I read it somewhere that was heavily choreographed and rehearsed.
Absolutely.
So why cinematography? Why cinema? What was the need? Because
it's cinema. Cinema is a visual medium. It's a medium of space, of time, of experience, of When I was 7, I wanted to be a magician. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a philosopher. And when I grew up, I realized that if I be a filmmaker, I can be all these together. So really, a film is a place where you have the capacity, you have the possibility of creating a holistic engagement. You have the possibility of enlightening yourself and share that enlightenment. And how do you share enlightenment? How do you share something that is profoundly moved you? That has given you the deepest connection you could possibly have with yourself and with your environment. How can you translate that? And a film is a great tool to translate that. It helps you translate the deepest of your experiences and the deepest of your enlightenments and the deepest of your understandings. Because it allows you to translate that through images, through sound, through dialogue, through character. So you are identifying the character and the emotional responses that they are having to the stimuli in their environment. Each time there is a stimulus in their environment, mirror neurons are triggering off in your brain as well. And because of that mirror imaging, that mirror experiencing, you're also having this deep emotional experience with each character. If the filmmaker gets lucky, that is, you're having a deep emotional experience. You're having an emotional engagement with the characters. You're having an intellectual engagement with their characters, with their thoughts, with their intentions, with their curiosity, with what they are seeking, what they are finding, what they are losing. You're having this intellectual engagement. You're having a visceral engagement. You're having a physical engagement. It's visual. It gives you a sense of the atmosphere and the mood through sound. It gives you, it pulls you into its world, into its universe by mirroring the universe inside you. So overall, it gives you a holistic world that envelops you so profoundly that that it becomes the deepest possible experience you can have, you know,
So,
besides having it yourself.
and in that way, cinema, the highest form of art, because it helps you express, convey, and feel.
And so far, I would definitely say that it's a great form of art. I mean, all forms of art allow you to do that. Painting allows you to enter a different universe. A piece of music allows you to do that. In fact, there's this thing that all arts aspire to a state of music, because music can be experienced without context, without concept. You know, it can be experienced as is, and the film also aspires to a state of music, and that it does through its temporal engagement. It's through time that it allows you to go in and out. A film is different from a 15-minute video. A feature film is different from a 6-minute video that you see on YouTube. It's different because it's a different kind of engagement. A 6-minute YouTube video can be a different kind of engagement. Not to say that a 6-minute YouTube video cannot enlighten you, but it will enlighten you in a very different way than a feature film. A 2-hour, 2.5-hour, 3-hour long feature film allows you time. It allows you to engage in the environment over some time. You can fall asleep and wake up in a film and experience something very beautiful. You know, so a film is also it's a special temporal medium. It allows you space, allows you time, allows you to engage with experience in a very visceral way.
So if you see film as a way to engage with the audience, so when you're thinking about the kind of films you wanted to make, so did the idea of Ship of ever overwhelm you? The audacity of that idea of creating such a film and actually going making it to the final stage. Did that idea ever overwhelm you?
That's very kind of you to say that. I do think in retrospect I do think it was an audacious idea, because it was also where I was pushed in life. I was at a point in life where I wanted to experience something profound so badly. I wanted to go to a cinema hall and experience something that is directly meaningful to me, is directly talking to me. That is not a profoundly moving European film. That is not a profoundly moving Bellatar film or a Tarkovsky film. That's a profoundly moving piece of cinema that talks to me directly. It's stemming from my immediate environment, from my cultural and intellectual environment, which is the whole world, and from my immediate relationships and my relationship with everything else, with the cinema, with the art, with literature, with everything. I wanted something to stem out of that, and I wanted to see that in theatre. And because it was not available in the cinema halls to watch, I had to go ahead and make it. So I really made something that I knew that I had only one certainty about. The other things I thought about the film were aspirations, were hopes, were wishes, but not certainty. The only certainty I had about this film was, if I were to go to a cinema hall and watch this film, I would be enlightened. That was the only certainty I had.
And so, the film is about paradox, the entire Ship of Theseus paradox, and in the end is also Plato's allegory of the cave. So that end scene, could you tell us something about why that scene? Because that scene was very profound, in the sense that I was expecting the Ship of Theseus paradox to come out somewhere. But in the end, that Plato's allegory, why that? What was your idea?
So the idea was to oscillate between the very descriptive and non-descriptive. Oscillate between chaos and order, between design and spontaneity. When you look at any existence, it exists in contradiction. The structure of the film was an attempt to engage with polarizing forces of chaos and order, of design and spontaneity, of the very descriptive scenes, very clearly descriptive, and the very non-prescriptive scenes, scenes that are not prescribing what they stand for. So the idea was to oscillate between these polarities constantly. You asked me about the allegory in the end. Now, it's again very nice of you to have that interpretation of Plato's cave. I left it open just so that people can have their own relationship with that moment. So again, the descriptive was a scene before where it was clearly mentioned what was going on, that these 6 people are receiving their audience from this one person, and then you go into something that is non-prescriptive, so that it's an invitation to you to have a relationship, and through that relationship enter the space of polarities and contradiction, enter the space of dualities, as you said, enter the space of dualities, because historically we have known that dualities have always led us to a non-duality. All contradictions have been an invitation to further synthesis. You have a thesis that the world is governed by rules of relativity. And you have an antithesis that no, the world is actually governed by rules of quantum probability. That it's not deterministic at all. You don't know where the electron is going to be at the next moment. And the electron is in fact going to be at several places at the same time. So the world is governed by quantum probability and causal determinism at the same time. The world is governed by rules of chaos and order at the same time. Right? And I thought that the structure of a film should kind of invoke that experience, invoke that contradiction, and invoke that non-contradiction also, invoke that synthesis as well. Because when you look at Ship of Theseus, and when you start arguing about form and essence, and when you start arguing about whether it's the same ship or not the same ship, whether a ship is defined by its essence, by its function, or by its form, by its shape, when you start having these questions, you start realizing that it's a constantly fluid space. It's a constantly fluid state of existence. All of us are in a constant state of fluxus. Each and every particle, each and every being is in a constant state of movement, in a constant state of fluxus. So every definition is
redundant.
Not redundant, it's necessary, it's useful, but it's useful at a micro level. And at a micro level, into a non-duality, into a non-polarizing, non-dual, synthetic synthesis of oneness. You know, like I'm being, and I'm not trying to be like I'm not being Zen, or you know, I'm not doing a spiritual mumbo jumbo here. I'm saying this non-duality is the nature of things, and the attempt was to create a film structure that somehow engages with that non-duality.
So these are all complex ideas for the layman. So did you see films as a way to express yourself?
Absolutely.
These ideas?
Absolutely.
And so do you subscribe to a particular school of thought, or just as you said, like the end, you prefer to stay open?
Well, I mean, particular school of thought, I know what I don't stand for. That itself is a stand. So, and when I take off all things I don't stand for, there is very little that I actually stand for. So in that way, I'm not that open. I mean, I'm open enough to readjust my worldview every day based on new facts that are presented to me. But I'm not open enough that my mind falls off. You know, so it's I'm not open, for example, to a certain kind of injustice in my environment, and to commit to that myself. That doesn't mean that. I mean, being open doesn't, you know, we need to understand what does it really mean to be open, you know? How much openness is required, is essential, and how much openness can be detrimental to our well-being. So that's really, I think, a larger question, a long question.
Something more simpler, sir, than since this about a college documentary. You said at one time that you wanted to design your own education. So why that need? Is it a disillusion with the existing educational setup? Or
would you feel it yourself?
I would.
Yeah.
But, so does it reflect the same in you? You wanted to.
Absolutely, and you guys are what, a decade after me? Like you must be what, 20,
20, around 20.
Yeah. So all of you are like 13 years younger than me. And so I was in college 13 years before you guys, and 13 years ago things were probably worse, if not as bad. And I was in Kodar, right? And the education environment in this country has collapsed. It's completely collapsed. It's of absolutely no use. It's been of a huge detriment to young people. It's causing such a huge amount of brain drain. Seeking is tapping into good data, good information is not encouraged. Young people are not facilitated to learn to interpret data in their own way. There are no interpretive skills that young people develop in going to colleges. There are no skills of reconstruction, of clarity, and these are the skills that a college should help people develop. Provide good information and disseminate that information in a way that people have the tools to interpret the data that is being thrown at them. So I think the college system in this country has really needs to go through a paradigm shift. All of us will work together. It takes some time for that to happen, and let's just hope that happens soon enough.
Because on the way when we were coming about education, he asked me whether I would send my own child to school. I said no. I said I would rather teach him myself. So would you say the same about self-education as the best education?
I would completely agree with you. It's not out of choice. It's an unfortunate position to be in, that there is no possibility of social engagement for children other than school, and schools are not the place for that engagement. No, I think the most important question is not how to make a film that makes you stand out from the rest, or makes you on a living, or makes you more important than the other. I think these are not the important questions. These are only symptoms. These are symptoms of something, of a bigger question. And the bigger question is, why do you want to make a film in the first place? Do you want to make a film because you want to stand out from the rest, and you want to make a living, or you want to entertain people, or you want to go to glamorous parties, or can be called some kind of a visionary. Do you want to make a film for these reasons, or do you want to make a film for something else, for some other reason? What is the reason for making the film? Why do you want to make a film to begin with? Why do you want to do anything to begin with? Like, what possible relevance could that be to anybody and to yourself, to make a film or to do anything? I think it's very important for young filmmakers to ask the fundamental questions, and to go beyond the last question, to go beyond the question of, if you ask the question of how to make a film that stands out, then you need to go beyond that and say why to make a film that stands out. And then you have to go beyond that and say, why do you want to make a film in the first place? And why do you think you and what you have to share, your worldview, is so relevant that you have to make a film in the first place? So these are the important questions. And then the other question is, what is your worldview? If you are making a film, say you have found many reasons to make a film, what is the worldview that you are sharing? How do you look at yourself? How do you look at the universe around you? How do you look at the relationship between yourself and this universe? What is your worldview? How do you look at things? What is your darshan? What is your perspective? What is your philosophy? What is it that you have that you think is really relevant for more than yourself, and you need to contribute it back to the whole? So there are more important questions that need to be answered, and once these questions are answered, the rest is symptomatic. Everything else is only a symptom.
That will require a round of introspection.
Not just a round of introspection, a life of introspection.
So on that note, I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.